Yes, now we can hear you. Fantastic. So good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
I know it's going to be very, very interesting. And before that, let's just understand who we are speaking to, and also I'll introduce you a bit. So guys, just so we know, please raise your hands if you're entrepreneurs, if you have a company. Good. Raise your hands if you are not from Israel. Good. So which one of you came from the farthest location? Canada. I know we have Ghana. Colombia. Wow. Argentina. Okay. Chicago. And you speak French and English?
Yes.
Yeah. So, sorry guys, Spanish speakers. Fantastic. So just before we start, I know you know who Inbal Arieli is, but just to make sure our viewers at home that will see this video also know. So as much as I can share, and you'll share better, but she's a serial entrepreneur, a lawyer, author of Chutzpah, Why Israel is a Hub for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and translated that into about eight languages. Amazing. And managing partner at Big.IL tech investment firm. So for the past about 20 years, you embraced leading executive roles in the flourishing Israeli tech sector, founded a series of programs, innovators, and also in the board of the 8200 unit elite intelligence corp veteran and commander as well. Lectured on a global scale, and we're going to learn about it. And featured on one of the 100 most influential people in Israeli tech, and also the top 100 tech business women speakers in the world. So round of applause for that. Thank you. Thank you. After we embarrass you a bit, just a bit, we're going to talk today about Chutzpah, about the mindset of Chutzpah, about entrepreneurship, and mostly just to learn from your experience and your learnings. And the first thing would be, again, I went through your career a bit, but just share a bit about your entrepreneurial background and how it led you to understand what Chutzpah is and write a book about it.
Okay, thanks for this question. So I actually did not start as an entrepreneur. I'll even say that at the beginning, at the genesis of my professional career, I didn't have aspirations to become an entrepreneur. Okay, so it wasn't like a dream that I had. It like you said, it evolved into that. For the first decade plus of my career, I was the most non-entrepreneurial, in the most non-entrepreneurial positions, in the sense, because I was a lawyer myself, working as general counsel in the tech ecosystem in Israel, so definitely in that world of technology. But as a general counsel, trust me, there's a limit to how entrepreneurial you can be. Okay, and I loved what I did. I loved it, and it was extremely interesting, and I learned a lot. But then after 10 plus years of career, and 3 kids. So, and it's connected. So back then, in 2010, I had already, let's do the math, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old boys, okay, at home, and I was exhausted. I was exhausted from the entire journey of everything together, and in the middle I also did my MBA during these years, so it was an extremely intense decade for me, and I decided that I wanted a break, okay, like a Sabbaton. I remember it was the first time I really understood the concept of having breaks every few years. And so stepping into that break, the decision itself was very relieving, okay? Just making the decision that I'm taking a break. But then after 2 weeks, I was a little bored. Because the decision was made, I was relieved, right? And now what, right? And so that break, okay, led me to think that I'm going to spend that year that I defined as a break year, as a gap year in my career, if you want, to do things that are not in the typical journey of my career, okay? And that's actually when I realized through that path that I'm an entrepreneur. That's when I actually started for the first time stepping out of my track, okay, on a side track and thinking, okay, what am I doing now? That's when I became extremely creative. That's when I founded the 8200 Entrepreneurship and Innovation Support Program, which was back then in end of 2010, the first accelerator in Israel. So there were no accelerators. It was not even called an accelerator because there were no accelerators back then in Israel. And it was really outside the scope of my trajectory. But that break actually enabled me to be very creative. And once I founded it, and it started very intensely also, I realized that I had this entrepreneurial passion. Okay, I just didn't know it was there. But once I let it go wild, it did go wild, and that's how I realized. That's how I started my entrepreneurial journey. That has evolved a lot since then into companies and businesses, and not just non-for-profit activities. But that's what let loose everything. So
the entrepreneurship, let's say, gene, it was in you, but you had to go through a journey to discover it in a way?
Exactly, and I would say, and that also eventually led to writing the book and the topics of the book specifically. But yes, I personally believe that we have people here from Canada, Colombia, the US, we said Japan, I know, you said Ghana, I think. Okay, Ghana, Israel. I personally believe that there are some very basic human qualities that actually exist in anyone, just like our muscles, like our body anatomy, that we do share. Okay, what's different is how we nurture it, how we foster it, how we develop our muscles, but the same basic body anatomy. And so I do believe that people by nature are relatively entrepreneurial. Just think of kids, think of young children. They are by nature entrepreneurial without putting a tagline of them being entrepreneurs. But at a very, very young age, they initiate a lot just by being very proactive and physical and curious, right? So yes, I believe it's everywhere. Everyone has it.
And where does the chutzpah come? So in the entrepreneurship, and there's hidden genes that we have or hidden skills.
So that's a bigger question. What does chutzpah mean at the beginning? What is chutzpah? And it means different things to different people. So just to be on the same page for our Hebrew speakers, is chutzpah a good, a positive thing or a negative thing? Chutzpah. It's negative, right? I mean, generally speaking, chutzpah is translated, if you'll go to the dictionary, into rudeness, impoliteness, and that's, of course, a negative thing, right? But if you ask a typical American, okay, what is chutzpah? Is it positive or negative? They may have a completely different opinion. And what does it mean? It means something else. So when I wrote the book, before it was titled Chutzpah, okay, by the way, I learned that the cover of the book and the title, just like with movies, by the way, is the last thing that the publisher would do, because it's a marketing tool, okay? So when I wrote the book, I didn't call it Chutzpah. Chutzpah was one of the elements in the book. The same content that you have today, it was there, but it was not titled Chutzpah because as an Israeli, it had more of negative connotations to me than of positive ones. But then I had a conversation with the publisher in the US, with HarperCollins, where the book initially came out, and they argued with me, and they said, oh, no, chutzpah is in our view, it's a positive thing. And we had this conversation, and the reason the book is called Chutzpah is actually because of them, but thanks to Jack Ma. Okay, so the book came out in the US, but while we were having this conversation, Jack Ma visited Israel to the inauguration of the Paris Center for Peace and Innovation. He was on stage, I was there in the audience, and he said it was his second visit to Israel, and that during his first visit, he learned two things. The two most important things he said he learned. One was about the power of innovation and technology. And the second, he said, in his words, was chutzpah, dare to challenge. That's his quote. And when he said that on stage, I realized that most of the world looks at chutzpah the way I'm thinking about it. And this is why the book is called Chutzpah.
What was the name before Chutzpah?
Oh, well, it had a working title, which was Roots of Entrepreneurship or Seeds of Entrepreneurship, and I'll tell you why. Again, to the Israelis here, it's a reference to. So the book speaks about childhood, about children, and one of the most famous, iconic, classical books of my generation is Zra'im Shel Mastik, Seeds of Chewing Gums. And it's about this tree that children plant. They take chewing gums and they plant because they think they will be able to grow a tree of chewing gums. So the working title was Seeds of Entrepreneurship, understanding that we will need to find a more appealing name.
Because, in my view, it really seems like in a way, you kind of owned the word chutzpah now. It's so much associated with you. And I think it's a great, it's such a good word. It's coined word and kind of relates to you.
Yes, so actually the chutzpah adventure also for myself has been incredible since the book came out in 2019 in the US. Because now in each one of these countries, so we have here, not by order of publishing, but we have the Ukraine, we have Hebrew, of course, we have Korea, Taiwan, China, and Japan. Vietnam will be here in 2 weeks, then Portuguese, Brazil in 4 months, and maybe the most personally incredible addition we will have in 6 months or so will be Arabic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, she definitely deserves it. It's interesting to see how many Asian countries, I know the Asian cultures, they are very interested in Israel and Judaism in general, but it's interesting to see how popular it is.
Right, it's not by coincidence, okay? It's
a chutzpah.
So just like in your startup, when you think about your target, your go-to-market strategy, I chose the US as the main initial market, but I also strategized together with HarperCollins to have the South Asian countries, given their interest in Israel and given their appetite and desire to learn about entrepreneurship, regardless to Israel, understanding the value and the power of entrepreneurship and creativity. I understood that this would be a very important market for the book, so we gave it priority.
And later we'll also touch on the strategy around the book and generally strategy when you have your own startup. But another question about this, because obviously you created this philosophy around chutzpah and around how Israeli entrepreneurship is coming to life. And I'm going to quote something you wrote on your website, which is, on the website it says, "I insist on sharing my chutzpah with the world, hoping to make it a better place for all of us. You should do the same." Now, you've lived in different countries, you travel, you have this worldly kind of view. But then again, what do you mean? How can each and every one of us make the world better through chutzpah?
Sure, so it does connect to what we said before about having, as Israelis, having this more negative connotation about what chutzpah is. And I actually think that when you unpack what chutzpah means, and you take the same energy of chutzpah, which in a second I will elaborate what it means to me, but you take the same energy and you put it on the right tracks, on positive ones, it's a nuclear force, okay? You can achieve so much with the same elements that could be also negative, if only we use them only for positive things. And of course, this is my personal goal, and the book has, at the end, one of the chapters is Tikkun Olam, about this whole concept of Tikkun Olam, and trying to not just aspire and thrive for a better world, but actually also do something to fix it. So that is the idea of using your chutzpah, your energy, your thinking big and not being afraid of making mistakes, and stepping out of your comfort zone, and being extremely creative and disruptive, even in a sense, annoying sometimes, with critical thinking, challenging the reality, all of these elements, but putting them on the right on the right tracks, can benefit the world.
So let's take all those elements that you just mentioned, and for the entrepreneurs currently and future entrepreneurs in the audience, how could they take it and consciously use it to form their business?
So I think the first element to start with is asking questions. And asking questions, again, if you go back to children all over the world, this is how they think. They think by questions. They learn about the world by questioning what's happening around them, right? Sometimes even to an annoying degree of keep asking why, but this is just because this is how they think. What if we could spend our entire days just instead of providing answers, asking questions? Okay. Personally, we would become much smarter by asking questions and not limiting ourselves to what we already know and the answers we have. But all of that movement could also create evolvement and development. So the first thing is not looking at reality the way it is. You're starting a company, you're starting a startup. It doesn't have to be a technological startup, just any initiative. Pause for a second to ask questions. Why are things happening the way they are? What are the forces? What's working well? What's not working well? Okay? Instead of coming immediately with a solution, which is a tendency that a lot of entrepreneurs have, specifically, by the way, in Israel. It's first coming with a solution and then finding a problem that fits that solution. But the right order is the opposite, is to first explore by reassessing the reality around us to find a big enough problem, an interesting enough problem, one we have passion to solve, and only then to ask ourselves, how can we solve that issue? Okay? So that is the first element. The second element I would mention is to not be afraid to make mistakes. So where's Nadav? I want Nadav. Let me ask you a question, okay? When did you learn to walk? Do you remember? Roughly. 2 years old, roughly. How many times did you fall before you started walking? A lot. So you didn't stop after the first time, right? No one told you, Nadav, you're not the best at walking. Okay, maybe you should find another way of exploring the world, right? So that's what happened today. It was you said it was your first attempt, right? That it's just like your first time you tried to walk. The next 5th time would look completely different. The 10th time would look different. You get the point, right? So not being afraid of making mistakes and taking the risk of being wrong is extremely critical. It's not easy, and it's a humbling experience, but with awareness and practice, okay, and openness, I think that's a critical element for entrepreneurs. Another element which I think is very important is to collaborate, to work together, not to be a solist, not just as an individual, but also as a team. If you think about the beginning or I would say when I started my career in tech, most startups worked from the garage, right? What did it mean? It meant that for 2-3 years they were developing their solution in the garage, hidden or separated from everything else around them. They were focusing, they were working hard in the garage, and then after 2-3 years they came out from the garage with this solution, whatever it was. Not relevant anymore, okay? What you're doing here is exactly that. You're coming to learn, you're coming to meet people. It's a very powerful value that you can get from getting out of the garage as early as possible. So there are no garages anymore, right? We work mostly in co-working spaces, through communities, and that idea of collaboration, both in teams, but also with people around you, whomever they are, is another key element. One of the things I talk about in the book is how, so there's a dictionary in the book, and there's a lot of focus also on language. Because language expressions we use, they mean a lot about society. They mean a lot about how we look at concepts and mindsets that we have. So one of the things I've learned when I wrote the chapters about teamwork, one of the things I've noticed was that in most languages, not all, but in most languages, I and we are two distinct, different words. They don't come from the same roots. And who's from Chicago, I think we said? Chicago, right? In English, there's, in the US, okay, English American, there's even an expression, there is no I in team. Right. There's no I in team. So the letter I does not exist in team, but of course the meaning is I is one thing, team is another thing, and when you're in a team, leave your I outside, right? So in Hebrew, ani, I, anachnu, we, or anu, we, these words come from the same root first. It's really literally the plural of I. But when you think of it, it goes so much deeper, because actually, what if a team could be comprised, and is actually comprised, of a variety of I's that don't think the same way?
Yeah.
Right? We speak a lot about diversity today, about diversity in backgrounds and diversity in opinions and diversity in thoughts. It's actually the opposite of saying there is no I in team. In a team, there are a lot of different I's, and it's actually extremely powerful. If you know how to create the right dynamic for all the I's to be heard, to be spoken, to be heard, to be noticed, and then to somehow, I don't know, facilitate that richness of ideas. So that's a fourth element. And there are six more critical, like overall 6 principles that I talk about, but I'll say, I want to point the last one maybe that I think is extremely important, and that is to be proactive, to do, to move. We said, just like children, if you put toddlers in the room, you put them here, they will start moving towards each other. They will not just sit and wait for something to happen. And that proactiveness is extremely important, to be in movement all the time.
So can you just repeat the 6 elements?
So here's what we'll do. We'll, you will all go to the website, and you'll have all the elements there, okay, and explanations about all of them. I think that's
Chutzpahcenter.com.
Chutzpahcenter.com, and that's how you'll be proactive. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good way to bring it on. So when we talked on the phone before this meeting, I told you that a few months ago I was visiting my good friend Bernd and Petra Valler. They're from Frankfurt, and I gave them your book as a gift. And then Bernd and I went to see the area, and when we came back, she started reading the book. And apparently Bernd was a veteran in Adidas, and Petra is a teacher, and she works with kids. And she said, that's amazing, because you start the book about kindergarten and how kids are being brought in Israel. And she mentioned some of your methods, and she said, I should try it with my grandchild. And she was so amazed by it. And I think it's a lot of things or a lot of who we are, especially culturally, but also personally, comes from our childhood. So maybe you can give us some insights, especially to the Israelis here. What can we learn about ourselves through the way we were brought up here?
Okay, that's a great question, and so I was born in Israel. I'm Israeli. I was born to Israeli parents, but my dad was a diplomat, and we traveled back and forth to Israel in my childhood, which gave me also a different perspective. Okay, mostly to Europe, and it gave me a different perspective on a lot of things, but also on what it means to live in Israel and to grow in Israel, and. What I've learned from speaking to Israelis who have read the book in Hebrew, which is the only language where the book is slightly different than the original version. So all the other versions are a translation of the English one. The Hebrew versions, there are already 2, are slightly different because they're adapted to the Israeli reader, for whom, in a sense, everything I write about in the book is obvious. Okay, so why would they want to read the book? Or what is their experience reading the book? And let me give you an example. Let's use the audience here. Let me randomly, I know some of you, I recognize some faces, but I don't know most of you. Let's take randomly Lag BaOmer. Okay, so I don't know where you grew up and where you lived. Your experience as a child in Lag BaOmer. Who's volunteering? Where are you from in Israel? Modi'in, okay. Not the largest city, right? What's in the center? Okay. What did you do in Lag BaOmer? As a child?
As a child, we would, you want like where we would get the wood from? Or what we would do?
What is for those who don't know Lag BaOmer, what is Lag BaOmer?
It's a holiday where we light a bonfire, where we do a bonfire, basically.
It's one evening, it's a Jewish holiday, okay? By the way, as Jewish as a holiday as New Year's Eve or Passover, less heard of, there's a reason. And what you do is you light, that's what happens in Lag BaOmer in Israel.
Yes.
As a child?
Yes.
Okay. Modi'in is a city. Who else had the same experience in Israel? Where did you grow?
I was born in South Africa.
Okay.
And came to Israel when I was 13.
Okay.
Coming from South Africa, where we couldn't go to our neighbors by ourselves as children because of the violence. And then coming to Israel was like coming to heaven
for a child.
as a child, where there was so much freedom.
Yeah.
So coming from a place where I couldn't go to my neighbors by myself, and coming and then having Lag BaOmer, where as kids, as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid, we went to the beach by ourselves. And had a bonfire on the beach until the early hours of the morning. Was like, wow. I'm totally in heaven.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that's actually, the comparison is really strong. Where you started saying, or maybe someone else wants to say, where do you get the woods from? I mean, we don't sell in Israel, so going back to my friend
That's the most embarrassing part of
so just a second, going back to my friend from Chicago, and I'll use you a lot, okay? With your permission, if you go to the US, even to Target or Walmart, you can buy piles of wood for heating. Yeah. We don't have that in Israel because most people don't heat their homes with woods, and we don't sell tranches of woods. So where do you get the wood for the bonfires?
You go looking at people's homes and shelters and
Building sites.
Yeah. Just go scouring for wood, basically.
Okay. So we said a few things. We said you go to people's homes and shelters, construction sites, which we have a lot in Israel, and you just steal. I'm quoting, okay? How many of you have read the book, by the way? Don't be shy. No, from the people who spoke. None. Oh, you did. Okay. So quoting what you're saying, okay, so we're stealing the woods, we're not buying them from Target or Walmart as children. Daylight, you're not really stealing because it's daylight. You're not doing anything forbidden, in a sense. How do you carry those woods because they're heavy? So, of course, supermarkets are so obvious, right? Right. Now, whenever I do this exercise, and I didn't forget the question. The question was about Israelis really learning about the concepts of chutzpah in their childhood. So now think about that entire project, which most Israelis have a common, childhood memory about, wherever they grew in Israel. The entire project is a project of a few weeks with teamwork, because you don't do it by yourself. It's always groups of children with a lot of some planning to it, in the sense that you're thinking where you'll go and some best practices. We will use the supermarket card, of course, every kid knows that. Competitive advantage or intelligence, checking on your competitors, finding the best location to do the bonfire. An entire project planned and executed by 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old children. And then the climax of lighting that fire and having that fun event, but it's about this entire project. Now, when you look at it, every Lag BaOmer as a child or as an Israeli, without putting meaning to it, yes, that's how we do it, and it even has some but you can criticize even the event. It's dangerous, it's risky. But when you look at it in the lens of entrepreneurship and creativity and teamwork and fostering these muscles that we've talked about at the beginning, and independence and self-reliance and confidence in self, thinking about through these lenses that's what it means to grow in Israel, okay? And our childhood, our day-to-day life here consists of a lot of moments like this throughout the country, throughout the different communities in the country. It sometimes gets a different flavor, a different weight to it, but overall, those elements exist here from a very young age, and the environment, and that's the main difference. So I actually don't think that, what's your name, please? Melanie. That Melanie of 2 years old in South Africa, 2 years old, was so different than Inbal of 2 years old in Israel. Okay, I don't think we were that different as children. What was different was the environment around us. And that environment has, of course, a lot of influence into the adults we become. So Israeli children at the beginning, at their early ages, are similar to our Japanese children, friends, and French, and kids from Ghana and from all over the world. As they grow, the environment nurtures and fosters and enforces specific skills on the account of others, but they're there. It's just about awareness and letting them go wild, okay, and giving freedom to those elements.
And I really liked the example of Lag BaOmer, and really like how much we learned from that. Like you actually kind of formulated a project structure. And that leads me to the next question, because I think from what I counted, you initiated about 3 companies or even more. I don't know, even more than that. But there is kind of a formula, and you said that you take this entrepreneurship formula into also publishing a book, and maybe into any different project, personal or professional. So if you can give us a glimpse on this formula to creating a startup or a project.
So it's funny that you're asking that, because my immediate answer is always to say there is no formula to anything. Okay, there's actually no fixed recipe, in my view. And that's also true for the Chutzpah mindset. But you are right that there are some, I would say, principles, okay, core principles that, in my personal experience, are repeated. And the first is really, like I said, to challenge yourself not to come with an immediate solution, but to better understand what are the problems out there that are relevant, that are in the realm, in the world of where you come from. But before deciding where to apply it, to understand where would you want to apply something. Okay, so that's the first thing. And that's true for the book, and it's definitely true for the company. So I started and sold 2 companies, okay, not 3 or 4, 2 companies, and other business initiatives of funds, but 2 companies that I founded, always with partners, and that's the second thing. And by the way, not just partners, but strategic partners. So not the typical story of co-founders, but my co-founders as a choice were strategic co-founders, okay? Not just in the sense of what capabilities they each brought to the table, that we were all complementing each other with our personality or skill set, but from a business perspective, strategic partners. So in a sense, both companies started immediately with, I would say, wheels on the tracks of the specific industry, vertical, whatever the case was. So staying in the exploration mode at the beginning, which is actually very difficult and not pleasant, before jumping further into the solutions. Defining before finding. Finding then is easier. The definition, the design and definition of who would be your partner, that's more difficult. Okay, and then once you have a clear understanding,
can you give an example on the book? Because you
yes,
mentioned before that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So just like I never thought of myself initially as an entrepreneur, I had no aspirations ever, never wrote, never thought of myself as an author. It was not part of my plans. But then I realized that I had a good story. And how did I realize that I had a good story? Because in interaction with groups and audiences, I realized that what I was telling them was of interest to them. Okay, that means I have a good story, not because I thought I had a good story. I saw that they were interested in what I was saying and wanted more. And that brought me to the decision that I'm and inspired, yes, of course, inspired by some dear friends that have published already books about Israel by then. I said, okay, there's a good story here. I'm going to challenge myself to write it. At that point, the easiest solution is to write in Hebrew. I'm Israeli in Hebrew. Hebrew is my mother tongue. And to write for the Israeli audience. But pausing for a second, who would be the most optimal audience for that story? It's actually non-Israelis. And then understanding, okay, from the big world, what's the tier 1 partner, strategic partner that I would want? And that is a big publisher. That was at least in my view. Now, it doesn't mean that for every author, that's the right thing to do. The reason I wanted a good, strong publisher in the US was because I did not want to trust on my personal capabilities of marketing the book. It's not my profession, okay? So Chutzpah, I'll address that in a second. What was chutzpahdik in the I would say communication with HarperCollins? But first, to just think that I am going to write a book that is addressed to the US market, but I want to have it published by a US publisher. That's not even chutzpah in my view. That's a strategic way of thinking. Okay, that is the reason why the book is translated into so many languages and top publishers in all these countries, because HarperCollins is a great publisher, is a top publisher. Okay. By the way, HarperCollins are the ones that sold the rights to Yediot Sefarim, the Israeli publisher. It was not the other way around. So that's one decision. And the second decision, or not decision, but the second chutzpahdik element. So writing this book about chutzpah with a US publisher, it's, by the way, it's on the business shelves. Okay, so books, just like any consumer or retail merchandise that you buy, has specific shelves, right? You go to the supermarket and you can find cereals in the snacks side or in the healthy food side. It of course makes a different price to it. It attracts different audience to it. So I chose, after a roadshow, just like with a startup, HarperCollins, but Harper Business, the business arm. And so the book, you gave the examples of your friend in Frankfurt. One of the publishers that was interested in the book wanted the book to be published as a parenting book. Same content, but they wanted it to be on the parenting shelf, if you want, because apparently parenting books sell more than, by the way, business books. Okay, definitely business books about Israel. But I didn't want that because I'm not a parenting guru. You can ask my kids. I'm definitely not a parenting guru. So that was another decision, a strategic decision. And then the way I worked with HarperCollins by itself had a lot of chutzpahdik elements to it. But I told them, we're embarking on this journey together. It will not be the typical journey you have, because the book is all about untypical things to you.
So it kind of makes sense, like
you walk the talk.
Exactly, you walk the talk. So if I'm trying to take what you said, and I hope I'll remember the right components, but basically what you mentioned is understand who you're talking to. So obviously Hebrew is not the right language. Understand who can take you further, like be strategic, find the right partners who could open the right doors for you. Make sure you do it still, like you don't compromise on your values or on what's important for you in the process. Like if this kind of things that I took from what you said about taking it to your company and startup. Now, another question, and I think after that we're actually going to move to you, so prepare your questions. Let's talk, it's inevitable, we cannot talk about Israel and chutzpah and everything without talking about failures, about right now, unfortunately, the market is, again, not in its best curve. And you were also one of the leaders in Modu, of course, with Dov Moran, a company that raised 120 million, 5 continents and then crashed, unfortunately, very fast. And you also had to fire a lot of people. I read in one of the articles that you even fired a couple in a certain company you had to work with. And you've went through all the hardships, and not only the good, obviously. So what would be, from your experience, and even from your, again, practices, what tips can they take to go through this journey, maybe stronger or better through the hard times?
So I think, in retrospect, one of the things that I understand now is that there are very few decisions that we make in our careers, or most probably in life also, very few that are really life-changing. Now, as we make these decisions, we always think that they are, the most critical, and they will completely change our lives to one side or the other. But in retrospect, you always look back and you say, oh, it wasn't that much of a drama. That's on one hand, okay? And I think that it's somehow reassuring. I wish someone would have told me, okay, that going through that period of time, which was extremely, extremely challenging, not only will not ruin my life or ruin my career, okay, but actually make it stronger and build it in a sense. I wish I had that voice and that I would have believed that person. That's a second thing, right? So that's one thing, but to bear that in mind, most of the decisions, most of the things we do are not really life-changing. The second thing is that to remember the example of that I gave Nadav. I think that's the easiest thing to do. We all learn to walk the same way, no matter where we were born, to what family, at what era, wherever in the world. We all learn to walk based on failures. And nobody thought to tell us to stop or not to continue trying. So just remember, try. We don't remember ourselves learning to walk, but remember that example, and I think it gives enough, energy and motivation to keep doing.
Just keep walking. Just keep
Yeah,
walking.
stand up and keep going. For those more adults here that remember Jacek from Zeuze, there aren't probably many. You remember him? Yeah, Jacek always falls and gets back. It's a TV show that we grew up on, and it's that. It's exactly, you fall, you stand up, you continue.
Amazing. So, guys, do you have any questions? Yes, we'll start with Sarit, and I'll repeat your questions. I'll repeat your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been working with global companies a few years now, and I take a lot of pride in my Chutzpah skills. I'm aware of them. But do you have any experience of you asking yourself sometimes, have I crossed the line?
Sure.
What do people think of me? Is it too much? Because I find that at least once a day I'm like, is it too much?
So just repeat the questions. Sarit is working a lot with different people, figures from the global market, and she uses Chutzpah, and she said, when is it too much? When should I kind of stop or understand the limits?
So I'll answer with a story, okay? A true story. In one of the companies that I founded, we were 4 partners, 2 Israelis, 2 Americans. Us Israelis, we knew each other very well, so we had, worked together and we knew each other well, and the 2 Americans also knew each other very well, and we joined forces together, founded this company, and, after a month of initial activity, we even got together physically here in Israel. It was their first visit to Israel, and we held these strategic brainstorming sessions. True story. And so we're starting the first day. We have these 3 days of brainstorming about strategy, go-to-market strategy, business model strategy, product strategy, all brainstorming, just the 4 of us. At the end of the first day, one of the US partners takes me to the side and asks me, tell me something. Why are you and Shirley, my co-founder's name, why do you keep arguing about everything? and I'm a relatively good listener. By the way, listening to everything is a very important skill to develop. So I didn't immediately respond. I paused and I wanted to understand what he was referring to. He said, from the moment we started the session this morning, you guys keep arguing about just everything. You have not agreed about one thing. Now, we were really strong partners. We thought the same about a lot of things. First, seeing it through his eyes was already something, okay? And then I asked him, I said, okay, I understand what you mean. We were constantly in conflict, okay? What is the purpose of the session? Why did we gather today? What's on our agenda? And he said, we're doing a brainstorm. I don't remember. Let's say it was strategy, okay? I said, okay. Have you ever seen a pleasant storm? True story. So then Joe pauses for a second and asks me, what do you mean? I said, this is what it is. That's the purpose of this conversation. It's a brainstorm. This is how we brainstorm in a storm. It does not mean we do not agree. Okay? It just means that it's a very constructive, for us, it's a very constructive way of actually thinking together. She says red, I say blue, and we try to understand why did she say red and I said blue, and then we figure out what's optimal, and we agree eventually. But it was very interesting to see it from his eyes, and I think it was very interesting for him to see it from my eyes, okay? And that is also the conclusion that I have as a tip for these events. Or these multicultural environments. A is to be aware of the fact that people you speak with, and especially if you do business in tech in Israel, 95% of the time you will not do it with Israelis. You have to be aware of the fact that we seem aggressive, that we seem in conflict. Agree or not, rightfully or not, that's a different question, but just be aware of that. That's the first thing. Then setting expectations. Saying to your partners, when I ask you questions, it's not because I disagree with you. It's because it helps me think. And I encourage you to ask me questions if you have. It will help me think better, okay? So setting expectations is the second thing. And maybe the third and most important thing is to build it on trust. So once the dynamics are set on foundations of trust, of positive intent, then it's easier to digest that. So starting by setting and creating trust is maybe the first step for that.
I love it. Thank you very much. Yes, your name and the question?
Hi, when your book came out, I bought it for my first non-Israeli manager. I was his first Israeli employee, and it was a success. It helped me, pass the message that I'm not a yes man. 2 years later, when he left and I got a new American manager, I tried doing the same. And I found myself explaining the differences between Americans and Israelis, saying it was, we were arguing about a specific tool. Anyways, I said, Israelis want to decide for themselves, Americans want to decide for everyone else. In return, he called me racist. Now, I wanted to know how well this, message that you're trying to convey to others have you ever tackled anyone who said, no, I don't want to know about it. You trying to explain to me how you're different from me, may appear as you think you're special, right? And we're not.
So Efrat says that you bought this book to your two different bosses to make sure they understand the cultural differences, and one of them didn't get it right. He thought it was a racist comment. So for you, how would you deal with such stuff?
So I'd say a few things. First, I've encountered a lot of questions Okay, I speak globally, and I think I've covered almost every country or group there is in the past 5 years, and I've gotten a lot of questions, and I'm actually encouraging tough questions because I think, again, just like we said before, this is what helps me also think and not keep repeating the same, idea over and over again. It helps me crystallize exactly what my messages are. Naturally, people who come to hear me speak or buy my book, they're by themselves. They're buying a product, and so they're more inclined into, at least they're more open to read what the book has to offer, or my keynote has to offer, or my ideas have to offer. So they sometimes disagree with me, definitely, but they are open to these ideas. I've never encountered, and this is a very interesting thing to say as an Israeli speaker, I've never encountered anti-Semitism abroad as a speaker, not as an individual in the street. I'm speaking as a speaker. While speaking about Israel and being very clear about my message, but I think it goes back to using, and that's my tip for you for next time, is using these childhood experiences. It's not by coincidence that I chose to focus the entire story or narrative of the book, which is about entrepreneurship and skills for the future and innovation, through the lens of children. Because these are really elements. Not everyone has gone through Lag BaOmer, or not anyone has grown in Israel in the same environment. But when you provide these examples, if you remember in the book the example of the slide, right? That's an example that people from all over the world relate to, okay? Because they remember themselves or their children in that situation. And suddenly they see the world, their beliefs, their world. It's not about are Israelis better or not as good as it. I don't speak about that at all. And there is no one recipe. There is no one way of applying these skills and becoming a creative, entrepreneurial, big thinker, individual, or organization or startup. That's part of it. It's, I'm humble. I don't have the answers for everything and for everyone. My answer is actually that these elements do exist in everyone around the world. And now it's about a choice. Do you want to use them, yes or no? Some people don't want to, and that's fine. I don't have to tell them to be more creative if they don't want to be, okay? So choice, awareness, and practice, but from a humbling perspective.
Thank you. Yes?
Can you elaborate a little bit about your journey as a woman entrepreneur? Like where you saw it as an advantage, where you saw it as a disadvantage along your way, and which platforms and what you would recommend as a woman entrepreneur, how we can leverage being a woman entrepreneur.
Sure.
Leveraging being a woman entrepreneur, yeah.
So I'm 48 years old, okay, in 2 weeks. And I am the youngest of, I have 2 brothers, and I have 3 boys myself. And so, as you imagine, as you can understand, I was not family-wise, of course, my mother, my grandmothers, but I was not surrounded, not as a mother and not as a sister, with a lot of girls or women around me. And that's the first fact that I want to mention because I think it is important, at least in my story. Growing up, and at the beginning, and even later on in my career, it was never an issue for me. So I encountered a lot of challenges as an entrepreneur. Which ones were associated with the fact that I was a woman, I don't know to pinpoint that. Which ones were associated with the fact that I am only 1.52 meters, I don't know to associate with that. Taller people have on average higher salaries, it's true, okay? There are studies about it. On average, taller people have higher salaries than shorter people. Have I ever thought and said, oh, when I was younger, maybe I got low, because now I set my own salaries, so it's different, but when I was younger, did I get lower salaries because I was shorter. It never, funny, right? But it's the exact example for me, okay? In my experience, it was never an issue for me. It was actually a non-issue. It was, and I'm speaking in past tense. And your neighbor to your sitting here will testify that it took a lot of years to even convince me personally, okay, that there is an issue. Okay, so for many years it was a non-issue. I will say that in the past 5+ years, I've realized that my personal story is just my personal story, and that for many, many, many other women, it is an issue. Not just for them, but for their relationship with the environment. And so I cannot stand anymore behind that concept of it's a non-issue, because for some people it is an issue. And that's the first important realization that I had. Once I had that realization, I cannot sit and wait, for things to happen by other people, or just to ignore them. So I realized it's an issue, and I realized we need to do something around it. I think you asked for, what I suggest or what I... So I think there are two main tracks that need to happen in parallel. And again, Hila has probably great answers for that. One thing is exactly what Hila is representing here, as women constantly and with so much intent and energy and strategy into it, creating support groups for other women. So it's women for women. Different types, different communities, different programs, different solutions. But that's one track. And the second track is exactly what's happening here today. It's not women for women. It's general communities, environments, giving stage to the topic of women, to the role models that women can be. And that is the balance that I found. It has to work together, both in the women to women track, but it's not enough. We cannot keep hearing our voice, telling our stories to ourselves, convincing ourselves. That's great, but it's not enough. We have to have also these types of events, organizations, structures, role modeling women, not just for women. I'm glad that all the men that came here today did not, stop at a different event and came to hear a woman. And I'm not sure I cannot speak for yourself, but I'm not sure they came to hear me as a woman. I hope they came here to hear what I have to say in general.
Yeah. So we have a time for just one quick question. So your name and your question.
Yeah, I'm Pamela. I'm from Spain. I'm Ola Hadasha. And I've been here like almost 2 years. And right now I'm an entrepreneur and I'm looking for a co-founder, right? And you mentioned about strategic partnerships, and I have 2 questions for you. One is, what do you consider to be strategic when finding a co-founder, especially a technical co-founder, which is my case? And second, I came to this talk because I feel I need the chutzpah to survive here. Right? So what would you recommend, like new olim?
So recommendations for new olim. Welcome to Israel, Pamela. And how to find strategic, or what to look for in a strategic partner. Yeah.
Wow, Pamela. Well, first again, welcome. And it's not easy being an Ole Chadash, or a new immigrant to Israel, because of the cultural perspectives, okay? Like you said, by the way, I'm very active in groups of Olim Chadashim because I understand how difficult it may seem from the outside looking into Israeli society. And you're, generally speaking, I think you're probably feeling that you have to fight every day for everything, in a sense, okay? Right? It's tiring, I'm sure. It's not easy. So the first thing I would say, well, first, I think you're in the right place. Okay, let me start with that. I love this country, and I do think it's a great place to be at. So kudos for the choice. I do think that one thing you can do a tactic is, and that would maybe answer partially also your second question, is to do exactly what you did tonight, and I hope you do in other events, or just to be out there and to meet as many Israelis as possible. You know what there are studies that show that in order to increase the chances of staying in Israel for new immigrants to Israel, the way to do that is actually to not be self-employed and work remotely with your home country, which a lot of Olim do. A lot of immigrants coming to Israel do that because of very practical reasons, which I understand. But it actually keeps you away from the general society. So working into integrating into the general society, and the first way of doing it is through employment. Okay, to work in an Israeli company or a multinational in Israel with Israelis is extremely important. Okay, extremely important. Second thing, on a more individual level, you don't have to be as chutzpahdik as Israeli. I mean, you have to be yourself. Okay, there's no one typecast. Just be yourself. I think that with years, these muscles, just by living here, okay, will be reinforced. But don't force yourself to be something that you're not. Okay. And speaking about the co-founder piece, it's even more difficult when you lack the networks that we Israelis come with. Okay, growing up, you have your neighbors, you have your friends from high school, you have your friends from the military, which is a very important network that we develop here in Israel. It's somehow parallel to the networks of universities in other countries. For us, it's the military. And if you have not gone through the military and you lack that network, by the way, not just new immigrants, other parts of the Israeli population have the same challenge. If they haven't gone to the military, they lack that reservoir of people around them. I would go as much as possible out, meet as much as relevant people. And what is a strategic co-founder? It's not just, and you're saying you're looking for the technological side of your...
And I found Israeli would be part of the strategic. Like my founder ideally should be Israeli, because I'm trying to find...
It really depends. So, there's no one answer. It really depends on what is the start, in what industry is the startup? What is the addressable market? What are you trying to achieve? If the startup or the company or the initiative or the business, whatever it is addressing the Israeli market, then yes, maybe finding an Israeli partner would be better. If it's a startup or an initiative, again, I don't know exactly what it is, a business initiative that addresses markets in Europe, I'm not sure that there's no set of criteria that are common to everyone. It really depends, like we said before, on defining what are the right partners for this specific endeavor. And it would be different than other people sitting here in the room that are looking for co-founders. So it really depends. And I'm sorry I don't have a more clear answer to you than just go out and meet people and come to events like this and just put yourself out there and share as much as possible. That's also very important. Share as much as possible what you're doing, what you're aspiring to do. And and that will attract people who are interested into your specific story.
And I think that's a great last point to really put yourself out there as well. Before we finish, you also granted us a discount for your amazing course, Chutzpah One-on-One Masterclass. It's on the website, chutzpahcenter.com. We're also going to have it on Startup Grind page. But if you remember, we'll share it on the newsletter. But we have a discount code, which is Startup Grind, capital letters. Thank you, in one word. Thank you so much. So we'll also have it on the page and also for you guys who are watching us. And before we finish, I mean, there is so much to talk about and so much to learn from you. And I want to say thank you from you guys, if it's okay, and from me, because I think from me, you've been this amazing figure, and yes, also a woman that is going out there, is doing things. Some of the things you've done, you were the first person to do it. So thank you for sharing your smarts with philosophy with so much passion and so many great examples. And really, guys, big round of applause to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lirone. And Shach.
And before we finish, I don't know if you know, but we have a world leader selfie photographer here, Shachar Matorin. But before, we have a surprise.
Yes.
Come on.
We talked a lot about Chicago this evening, several times. So we have a surprise.
We're all going to Chicago.
We have a live show
Oprah Winfrey.
from Chicago. Where is the Chicago singer? He's coming to sing for us, all the way from Chicago to Tel Aviv. Thank you.
What a chutzpah.
So let me give you a little bit of background on what the hell I'm doing up here in the first place. My name is Rajiv Nathan. I go by the name Raj Nation. Out of Chicago, I run a company called Startup Grind. We're all about giving founders a voice through their pitch. But one of the other ways we do that, I'm also personally a rapper. And I make raps about startup life. And coming out next month is an album called, I don't know, in this country, are you familiar with the term GOAT? Yeah. Greatest of all time? Yeah? I'm coming out with an album next month called Goat to Market. And so I was like, Shahar, I'm gonna be here. Should we just should we help people become the GOAT with a little bit of music here? So thought I would just rap. This is a never before been performed live. Simultaneously, I'm on some medication right now that has me like 25% dizzy at all times. This is the intro track off of Goat to Market. Hit it. When they looking at the kid, thinking, can he really do what he said that he did? He like, give me some claps with this. Yes, yes, let's go. Fuck it, inhibition, he's going out on a mission and breaking through his condition because it's true. I do. Shedding his inhibition for betterment of his children. The dead is a just condition. Why? Cause I do. One step and me asking for accomplishments, but honestly the promises in his mind is bound to shit. 2 steps they want to see accreditation, but credit facing him's measured, so instead I guess to check his Facebook. 3 steps they want to figure his ascension, investigate his things to see he's building from his senses. 4th step, y la puerta no está abierta, ojos en la salida, así cuando cuesta. Go to market, know the star shit, like a fat blunt that you roll and spark it. Put it on the table like he's open-hearted. Devil looming overhead, control the darkness. Revoluminated, see the soul of artists. From his first breath till there's no more carcass. Take it to the top from the stove's apartment. Get it, go to war, see the soldiers marching. Silence, on the scrolling park, broken parts assembled in the golden arches. Bringing out the table when the stove is warm and they got spinach in their teeth. See the photo storage. No chorus, mistakes he will not repeat. Spit some rad-ish, so when he turn up, he is on the beat. Coming from the underground to turn out with the broccoli. Taking every carrot in return, you get a plot of greens. Flip a brown field, but dang, he planned properly. Goes without saying, your man is high property. More than intellectual, his brain is the monopoly. So put it on his name, take a chance to hit the lottery. Groupies giving up community checks for baggage. Income tax, I think community's best. Savage, who's in front of me with duplicate tread. Having you and me get battered by my soon-to-be flex package. And they asking how you shit with no promises. His confidence in hooping, I would be ball dominant. How if I find myself on the gridiron, I'll be off the gridiron in the crease, pumping hockey stick. On some 90s shit, I'm in my attitude era, and the evolution is near. Couldn't be more apparent. My core appearance is raw, truth you have fought for daring. I done killed so many legends, got a coffin sharing. Drop the horns from Blair and listen to the introduction. I can be anything but thankless, we need more discussion. Who's the NXT? It's me, please endorse shit. You want that dry powder? I get around like sincerely yours, bitch. Hey. Where'd the rest of the song go?
Improvise.
If I'm to build the next Rockefeller, I am not the fella to end the track on an acapella. Like a stop propeller, I rock it but try to block a failure. Bring the beat back or this is about to be an awkward trailer. There's stuff, yeah, like that. Just like this, just nothing crazy. Let me just vibe out for just like a little bit longer. Just to get into the next track, you know? Yo. This the medium for GTM, the seed and stem, believe it's the reason behind your BPM. That's from morning till it's 3 p.m. Like a long arm box of fog crowds, I'm reaching them. Now picture that like a JPEG without the E's. Any way you file it, last thing is you respect the G. Put some respect on me, the truth is on my throat. Why be the unicorn when you can be the GOAT? Put some respect on me, the truth is on my throat. Why be the unicorn when you can be the GOAT? When you can be the GOAT. Why be a unicorn when you can be the GOAT? Shit.
So, Reggie, is this your first visit to Israel?
First time.
Perfect. So, I have something for you. Look, you're going to spend some, I don't know, how long are you spending? What?
Well, I just wrapped up 2 weeks here and I leave tomorrow night.
Perfect. So, you know some of these words. And Chutzpah you already know. Balagan you know?
No, I don't know that one.
You don't know that one? Okay, you'll ask your Israeli friends. It's an important one to know.
I know Tachlis.
Oh, Tachlis, here. Okay,
Perfect.
So this is yours. And I'm waiting for a rap song with all these words.
Oh, damn. I worked a line of Spanish into
We
that
can
song.
go on a show together.
Yeah.
You'll sing, I'll dance.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much. And now, come over. We're going to have a group selfie with the #1 selfie photographer, guys. Come over.